Thank you to Sakurako and Tokyo Treat for sponsoring today's video. Shinji Hirako's Bankai was never revealed to us throughout the course of all 74 volumes of Bleach, and that was honestly a bit of a surprise to me, as he was a character who I really expected to see a Bankai from in the final arc of Bleach. It just made a lot of sense to me. He was a major player in the Arrancar arc, he was the leader of the Vizards, and he had just regained his position as a captain of the Gotei 13, but above all that, Sakanade was just a really cool, really unique Zanpakuto, and I think a lot of people wanted to see what he could bring to the table as far as Bankai was concerned. However, of course, if you've read all the way through the story, you'll know that his Bankai never manifested, and in fact he pretty much did nothing in the final arc whatsoever. While this is a big shame, it seems like the author of the light novel Spirits Are Forever With You and Can't Fear Your Own World, Ryogo Narita, felt the same way, as he decided to unveil Shinji's long-awaited Bankai in the final novel of Can't Fear Your Own World itself. And Shinji's Bankai is something of a mouthful, being Sakashima Yokoshima Happo Fusagari. But what exactly is this Bankai? What can it do? What are its abilities? And what are the circumstances under which it performs the best? Well, in this video, we're going to find out. Before we get started on the video, guys, if you haven't hit subscribe yet, make sure to do that now for more Bleach content like this every single week. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a thumbs up as well, as it does help to support me and the channel. It gets us more traction on the YouTube algorithm, and I'd really appreciate it. And if you like what I do here and you want to take that support from me another step further, I do have a Patreon for the channel as well. Now, of course, you don't have to support me over here at all, but if you did decide to, you can get videos like this one early, and you can support me for as little as $1 a month. Everyone who is supporting the channel is coming up on screen right now. As always, I want to give you guys a huge shout out. Thank you so much for helping me do what I love. I really appreciate it. So, Shinji's Bankai, it is a bit of a mysterious one. Like I said, it's one I always wanted to see, and certainly once we got Rose's Bankai in the Thousand Year Blood War, I really thought there was a great chance we would see Shinji's as well. I don't know why, really. I guess it's because we saw the other two Vizard captains use their Bankai, so it kind of made sense to me that the leader of them all, at least in the Arrancar arc, would get a chance to show off his. And especially with Shinji actually travelling to the Royal Palace for the big final showdown, I thought he might get a chance to shine, but alas, it wasn't meant to be. And interestingly enough as well, I think the 5th division, in terms of the canon story itself, is the only division which we never get to see a Bankai from whatsoever. I think that's right, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that is correct. So before we talk about Shinji's Bankai itself, let's do a bit of context first regarding his Shikai. His Shikai's release command is Collapse Sakanade, and basically his sword doesn't change all that much, but the changes it does have are quite significant. The end of its hilt turns into an enormous ring with which Shinji can then guide the sword using his hand, which is a really cool visual, and the blade itself gains these small holes within the center. And basically, Sakanade's ability is quite simple. As Shinji spins the sword, it generates a sort of sweet scent, which, as we've mentioned before, in the anime is depicted as being a sort of opulent purple smoke. But basically, anyone who smells this sweet scent is taken to the inverted world. And this was a really cool reveal, because throughout his appearances in the Arrancar arc, Shinji has dropped several hints regarding the nature of his Zanpakuto. His first appearance in the story, he is hanging upside down in the sky, and when he arrives at Ichigo's school, he writes his name backwards, saying it's a speciality of his. So it's really cool that this is his Zanpakuto's power. But basically, anyone who is captured within this inverted world has all of their senses reversed, essentially. Their eyesight is reversed, left to right, up and down is reversed, back and front is reversed for them as well, but it goes even deeper than that. The direction someone attacks you from is reversed, the direction you take damage from is reversed as well. And Shinji himself says that the more experienced you are in a battle, the harder you will find it to deal with, because you are used to fighting on reflex and instinct, and it won't save you if your actual senses have been turned against you. So it's honestly really awesome, cool as well to see the reflection between this and his former vice captain Aizen's Kyoka Suigetsu. They are both all-encompassing illusions, although I would argue Aizen's is totally and utterly superior in every way, but Sakanade is very strong in its own right, and thanks to Sakanade, Shinji is the first person on screen to land a hit on Aizen. And in the Thousand Year Blood War arc, we see that Shinji has actually trained himself to speak backwards to amplify the disorientating effects of his Shikai. So this is really cool, and I also love that panel of him using it in the Thousand Year Blood War. That's the kind of visuals I wanted from this sword, to see him like twisting upside down as he uses it against Bambietta is really, really cool. But this sword is an interesting one as well, because it seems like Shinji can target specifically who he is using it against, and this will be very important for when we talk about his Bankai in a moment. But basically, during the big final clash against what they think is Aizen, Shinji is using Sakanade, but presumably the captains who are fighting alongside him aren't affected here, only Aizen himself is. It's difficult to know if maybe Shinji has briefed them on Sakanade prior to this, and so they know to fight backwards, or they are simply not affected by it. Based on what we know about his Bankai, I would assume it is the latter. Shinji can actively target one person to affect with his Zanpakuto. And so, unlike his Shikai, which is better for one-on-one duels, it gives Shinji the total upper hand, his Bankai, Sakashima Yokoshima Happo Fusagari, is the, funnily enough, complete opposite. Upon activating his Bankai, it basically targets an enormous, wide area, and everybody within it is affected regardless of whether they are Shinji's ally or not. So, like when we see him using his Shikai, it seems like he targets down Aizen specifically in that skirmish. Here, if he used his Bankai, if he had used his Bankai in the fake Karakura Town fight, everybody involved would have been caught up in it, similar in a way to Kyoraku's Bankai in that sense. But where Sakanade's Shikai preys on its opponent's senses, its Bankai confounds their minds instead. It goes a little deeper than just that surface level, and the simple ability of his Bankai is to reverse allegiances. If you are a friend, you become a foe. It turns allies against each other, and it turns enemies into friends. Because of this widespread ability, Sakashima Yokoshima Happo Fusagari is far better suited to fighting massive groups of enemies, which again, I think is really clever, because again it's an inverse of Shinji's Shikai, which is much better at dealing with a single person in a duel scenario. This is way better at dealing with an enormous mob of enemies, which again flips on its head the typical kind of relationship between Shikai and Bankai. The Shikai should normally be better at dealing with, you know, casual minions, fodder hollows, that sort of thing, whereas the Bankai is the trump card you use against an all-powerful boss-like enemy. As Shinji himself says, however, though, his Bankai and Shikai are all flipped upside the wrong way, and his Shikai is better at dealing with bosses, while his Bankai is much better at dealing with fodder. And I think that's a really cool detail. However, because of its dangerous nature, because he could actively turn other Shinigami against themselves and have them fight to the death, it has actually been banned for usage within the Soul Society, much like the Bankai of Kenpachi Kurayashiki, which we did a video on not that long ago, which again is another cool little detail, and perhaps explains why he doesn't use it in the Thousand Year Blood War arc, although at the end of this video I'm going to go over a scenario that I have kind of come up with, which I think would have been really awesome to see in the manga story itself. So what we've got here is a dangerous but highly situational Bankai, one that is incredibly powerful, possibly powerful enough to take out nearly everybody in the series, and I don't say that with hyperbole. I think used in the right way, Shinji's Bankai could potentially defeat nearly, say he comes up against all 10 Espada, and he doesn't have an ally anywhere near him. Were he to use this Bankai, I think they would all kill themselves. Because Shinji's Reiatsu is obviously that of a mid to high tier captain. I think he's roughly about the same as most of the Espada, so realistically this would work no problem. He does mention in the novel that were someone of Aizen or Yhwach's caliber to come around, it probably would have no effect on them whatsoever. So clearly there is an upper limit here, which, you know, is one of the laws of the Bleach universe. But against most kind of regular enemies, Shinji's Bankai is probably going to clean up. And so we've established then that Shinji's Bankai, quite simplistic, just creates an area of effect ability that turns friends against each other and has them savagely kill one another, while leaving Shinji out of the fight, which is something we'll get into in a moment. We know it works great then for groups, but how does it work in a 1v1 scenario? Could it even work at all? Well, I've tried to break it down. The issue, of course, with using his Bankai in a 1v1 scenario is that there's only 2 combatants involved and they are already going to be enemies. So does that mean if we take the idea that Shinji is unaffected by his own Bankai based on the way his Bankai activates, which again we'll get into, that means the only person that's going to be affected here is his opponent. So presumably, that would simply just change them into an ally and that would be the end of it. Of course, if Shinji is not affected by his own Bankai, does that mean that enemies relative to Shinji aren't affected either? So if someone was only focusing their attention on Shinji in a 1v1 scenario, would the Bankai do absolutely nothing because it can't change the enemy because Shinji isn't being affected by this? Can it change their relationship with him directly? I don't really know. It's kind of hard to say. And interestingly enough, I thought of another scenario. Imagine a situation like Byakuya versus Tsukishima. That's actually very similar to what might happen if Shinji used his Bankai in a 1v1 scenario, and it potentially exposes a weakness with this as well. Byakuya and Tsukishima are supposed to be allies in that fight. Once Tsukishima has sliced Byakuya, he inserts himself into Byakuya's past as someone that Byakuya has known and trained with for years. Like Byakuya, he says himself that he owes Tsukishima everything. Yet, while that's a clever play on Tsukishima's part, it is a misstep because Byakuya does not really work that way. It doesn't matter if he sees Tsukishima as an ally or somebody that he feels he absolutely owes everything to. He kills him nonetheless because at that point in time, Byakuya's true allegiances were to Ichigo, and he knew that Tsukishima was a true enemy to him, so he killed him regardless. So I'm saying, in the context of Shinji's Bankai, even if it did turn them into his ally, would they be able to override it somehow, much in the same way as Byakuya does to Tsukishima's own power? It might be a context thing, or it might not. If it actually burrows deep into their mind and essentially flips a switch to when they have to attack their own friends, or they have to be amicable with who they were once enemies with, it seems like they might not be able to do anything about it. But if we talk briefly about how this Bankai actually looks and how it works and how it activates, it honestly is really cool, and I love the overall visual design. However, before we dive into that, there is some exciting news. The channel has its first ever sponsorship, and that is all thanks to you guys watching and supporting me and the channel. I really appreciate your support, and I think it's a product that you guys are going to really like and get some value from, and that was what was really important to me. So beforehand, let's have a look at the sponsor of this video. And out of nowhere, Jade is here to help me out with the very first sponsorship for the channel, which is Tokyo Treat
and Sakura.
Tokyo Treat is a monthly Japanese subscription box full of popular Japanese candy and snacks, such as Japan-exclusive Kit Kat, Ramune, ramen, and many more. And Sakurako is a monthly Japanese subscription box full of authentic traditional Japanese snacks from Japan's local artisan snack makers. Both are delivered straight from Japan to your door. In order to keep things exciting and fresh, Tokyo Treat and Sakurako's boxes come with a different theme every month. And so the idea behind Tokyo Treat and Sakurako is they want to share Japanese culture with the world, and what better way to do that than through the medium of snacking. Now, you get authentic Japanese snacks in these boxes, and if you don't know what they say or what they are, thankfully Tokyo Treat and Sakurako include comprehensive booklets for both boxes. They provide a booklet inside every box explaining each and every snack that you get that month, and these comprehensive booklets also include a little bit of detail regarding that month's theme. And so first up we have the Tokyo Treat box with its theme of Summer Motsuri, which I believe is like a festival. And as we mentioned earlier, these are these sort of more fun snacks, the pop candy and stuff like that, as opposed to Sakurako's more traditional and authentic snacks. So, what do you fancy?
Oh my god.
From here? Luckily, the booklet will tell you everything that you actually are getting.
Oh my god.
We have here some salty vanilla Pocky if you want to try some of those.
Definitely. Ha ha ha.
That's what it's like, sort of almost like a ice cream kind of, or white chocolate kind of taste.
I can't taste the salt too much either, because you didn't like it sometimes.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of salted caramel. or stuff like that.
This is really subtle.
Yeah, that's really nice.
I like it a lot. 10 out of 10.
Fanta Lemon
Oh,
is actually my favourite flavour of Fanta in the world. So
it is. You're going to open that fizz on camera with a little bit of special ASMR for
hopefully.
the viewers. Oh!
I was a bit worried about it going everywhere then, but I think we're okay.
It's come a long way.
Oh, look at that.
What's it like?
That's really nice. Yeah, it tastes very lemony.
I mean, as you would expect. There
Which
is
is what I
definitely a lemon theme. Can I try some?
Of course you may. Yeah, that's very
Thank
nice.
you.
And then I think the final thing that we should try from Tokyo Treats box is cookies and cream Kit Kat. Now, I think Japan is fairly well known for having, you know,
Oh, the best Kit Kat
eccentric Kit Kat flavours. There you go.
flavours. Cheers.
Yeah.
Clink. Oh, rejection.
Too keen.
Walking
It does taste
slowly.
like cookie. It does taste like cookies and cream. Yeah.
It does.
That's good. It's really nice. So that's not the only box we got. We do also have Sakurako as well.
Oh my gosh, I'm dying over this little Sakura side dish. Look at that.
The Sakura side plate, which apparently is dishwasher safe. We
Really important.
We don't
we
have,
don't
a
have
dishwasher.
one, but if we did,
Yeah.
it'd be safe.
So this month they've teamed up with the Kanagawa government and local snack makers to kind of bring you something really quite authentic, which I think is really cool. And the first thing you want to try is bikuri dorayaki.
Yeah, it's this thing right here, which is super
Looks a little bit like a
squishy.
pancake, but apparently
It does.
bikuri means it has like a surprise in it. I think, or
Translates
something like
to
that.
surprise. Okay, I'll try break it in half. Whoa, I just want to show you this on screen. Look at that snap. Oh my god.
That's nice. It tastes very sweet.
It does.
It actually does taste a bit like a pancake. But it's really nice.
Okay, right, so I'm going to pick Tom's last one to try. So this is a Roman sketch biscuit, so I'm just going to put that there if you have a look. It's got a little design on it. You eat that.
It's crunchy and delicious.
Do you know what? This is just a sidetrack here, but I really like that in here as a vegetarian that they put when it's vegetarian friendly, which is a nice touch because you never know.
So we've just had our first tastes of our Tokyo Treat and Sakurako boxes. But if you wanted to get boxes of your own and support the channel at the same time, you can do just that. Tokyo Treat and Sakurako are giving me a special deal that I can pass on to you guys. Use my code, which will appear both in the video description, the pinned comment, and on the screen right now to get $5 off your first Tokyo Treat or Sakurako box, just by following the links below. And guys, if you do get the boxes, I really hope you enjoy them and love the snacks that you get. They are piled high, they are awesome, they come with great unique themes each and every month. If you order before June the 30th, you'll get these boxes, which are the July 2022 boxes. So guys, thank you so very much, and thanks again to Tokyo Treat and Sakurako for sponsoring this video. So then, the visuals of Shinji's Bankai. When he activates his Bankai, he is encased within a gigantic flower, like a bud. And then when the fighting is done, the flower blooms and Shinji is standing in the center of it on this small pedestal, this platform of sorts within these now spiraling open flower petals. His blade itself has also been reversed from its Shikai. The ring that he used to control the blade is now at the end, the tip of the sword itself, turning it into a staff of sorts. And it's interesting because we don't really get too much in the way of details about this Bankai. Does the Bankai only open up when everyone in the vicinity is dead, or is it on a sort of time limit when it blooms and sets Shinji free? If Shinji is set free prior to everyone being killed, can he still join in the fight? I think he probably can, because he mentions that if he were to use his Bankai in the vicinity of his own allies, he could still pretend to be their ally anyway. So that's kind of interesting to me. Can he still cut things with his blade as it appears in Bankai? I'm guessing he probably can, and the circular part of the end of the sword can just be used like a normal weapon, I guess. Again, we don't have an awful lot in the way of actual deeper details about this thing since we've only seen him use it once. But I really like that idea visually of how this works, closing in on him like a bud and then blooming in the middle of essentially a field of death is really poetic, and I think that's a really cool visual to imagine in your head. Just this war-ravaged battlefield, and then in the center of it all, this beautiful flower that opens up and frees Shinji. I think that's really cool, and obviously the flower, I think, is there to, you know, kind of cover him and make sure that he's not affected by his own Bankai. Another question, say for instance he was surrounded by enemies with Hinamori. Could he, you know, hold Hinamori close, activate Bankai, and they both be enclosed within the bud and protected? Honestly, I'm guessing yes. I feel like that is how it would work, but that is purely speculative on my part. But as for how Shinji actually uses his Bankai, well, like I said, that is in the light novel Can't Fear Your Own World. At the very end of part 2, the group of Shinigami all arrive at the Valley of Screams for their essentially final confrontation with the main villain Tokinada Sune Yashiro. However, one of Tokinada's allies, the monstrous, ancient, hollow Ikomi Kidomo, basically spawns just hundreds of thousands. The novel says it could be tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of minions that go and swarm the Shinigami kind of the moment they arrive on the battlefield. Shinji basically says to leave it to him. Kyoraku kind of understands. He basically gets everyone to leave and leaves Shinji with this mass of enemies, which, you know, understandably, some of the people who don't know about Shinji's power are a bit concerned about. You get amazing imagery here. Kubo, thankfully, did a couple of drawings for the moment Shinji reveals his Bankai, which I'm really happy about because, in my opinion, I enjoy the novels, but actually seeing Kubo's artwork really legitimizes it for me, and it makes it so much easier to visualize as well. And of course, Shinji's Bankai eventually made its way to the mobile game Bleach Brave Souls as well. But it's really cool. You see him staring down this massive torrent of hollows. He's spinning his Shikai in his hand, and then he kind of brings it up to his face, and he says, you know, he's actually quoting Gerard Valkyrie, which is weird because Gerard wipes him out immediately. So that was kind of weird to me. But he's like, you know, oh, what was that giant Quincy saying? Oh yeah, if I turn this whole situation around in an instant, that will be like a miracle, right? So I'm going to flip things upside down, and then he activates Bankai, Sakashima Yokoshima Happo Fusagari. He's enclosed, and all of the hollows just butcher each other, and then when he is set free of the flower, there's just a sea of white, mutilated corpses around him. And that's pretty much it. That's all we get to see of his actual Bankai, but it's enough, and it's quite a simple Bankai, which in some ways I think are my favourites. As you know, if you've heard me talk about it before on this channel, possibly my favourite Bankai of all time. That's debatable. That could be a video. Is Kisuke's Bankai, Kanon Biraki Benehime Aratame. It's incredibly simple, and I think it works really, really well. And Shinji's is also simple in the same way. And so, while we never got to see Shinji's Bankai throughout all of these volumes behind me, which is a bit of a shame, it is nice that we got it regardless. There are still plenty of characters in Bleach who received far less than this. There are loads of Bankai we have still yet to have any inkling of whatsoever. That being said, I do think there is a way Kubo could have introduced this in the Thousand Year Blood War. Even if it is banned, even if it is useless against allies, I think you could just do a situation very similar to what happens in Can't Fear Your Own World, but in this final arc. So there's a couple of instances where I think maybe it could work. One of them I prefer to the other one. So the first one is the one I don't like as much, but basically Shinji can... I mean, the thing is, we don't really know how big the area of effect is, but if Shinji goes away from the rest of his allies a considerable distance, presumably it'll be okay. The first one that seems to make sense to me is that he could have used his Bankai to deal considerable damage to the insane amount of monsters that were being rained down on them by the Soul King's surplus Reiatsu. Now, having Shinji destroy a bunch of those monsters I think would maybe imply a little too much, because the idea was supposed to be it was so overbearing because of the Soul King's colossal Reiatsu that they could do nothing about it. So that's why I don't like that one as much, but it seems like that would have been a helpful moment, and again it would have been a nice little contrast between him and Aizen, the two of them destroying those monsters. The one I prefer, though, is, I think, more similar to the one in the book. But basically, in chapter 628, when the group arrives at Varvelt, they arrive in the Quincy Royal Palace. Shinji is one of the first guys there. He steps out of the door and he's like, "What? Where are we? You know, why are we in the Quincy Palace?" Yhwach is later, in that same chapter, told by Hashwolf that the Gotei 13 have arrived. And he doesn't really do anything about it, he just sort of sends the Schutzstaffel out to kind of deal with them. But I think you could have had a small preliminary moment where Yu Haruki is just kind of like, you know, oh, okay, let's greet our guests with an army worthy of them. And he basically just puts his hand on the ground. And I can imagine this massive shadow shooting out from his hand, going straight down the middle of Varvelt, straight through, winding through the streets before it eventually arrives at the Gotei 13. And they are totally surrounded by this colossal garrison of soldat. And I think that would have been really cool. It's like it's like a welcome gift to the enemies, the invaders that have just arrived on their sacred ground. All of these hundreds of soldat are rising up out of the shadows to greet the Shinigami as they arrive in Varvelt. And of course, the idea at this point, although I don't think it's ever really emphasized enough, was it was supposed to be a bit of a race against time. So the other Shinigami are like, we can't be held up here, and Shinji just sort of spinning his Zanpakuto is like, don't worry, I'll handle this. It literally wouldn't have taken more than a chapter for him to use his Bankai against all of these soldat, wipe them all out in one go, then go and catch everyone up. I think that would have been really cool. It is literally exactly the same as what happens in Can't For Your Own World, but I think it works, so it makes sense to me. But that's basically it for Shinji Hirako's Bankai, Sakashima Yokoshima Happo Fusagari. Let me know in the comments below what you think of his forbidden Bankai, the Bankai that cannot be used in the Soul Society, much like one of the previous Kenpachi. A very situational Bankai, but visually really pleasing, I think, and I actually really like how the Bankai works. I love that it turns friend against friend. I think that's really cool. You know, bypassing sensory transformation and going straight to addling someone's mind, I think is quite scary. And this Bankai, I think, really has the power to topple much of the Bleach universe. But that's it for this video, guys. I really hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments below what you like about Shinji's Bankai. Would you have liked to seen it incorporated in the 1,000-Year Blood War, and how would you have liked to have seen that happen? Let me know in the comments below. But until next time, I'll catch you later, and I'll see you then.